I'm not sure that we have the actual like empirical evidence to say that that once you get your PhD that you don't develop lifelong collaborations, right? Like, I think it's probably really varied. I think some people hold on to some of those relationships that they formed during their PhDs, and some people don't. But I will say, like, I can certainly understand why some people are reticent to hold on to those relationships, because some of those relationships may have been really unproductive, very difficult, very like emotionally challenging, right? There's a lot of power dynamics in the academy. And I know from mentoring dozens of doctoral students that some advisors are really fantastic and some advisors are not. Some advisors give their students a lot of agency, but also direction. And some people, sort of create really toxic, dependent relationships where grad students feel constantly like beat down and never really like they're contributing. And that can feel really icky. Like, why would you want to maintain a relationship with somebody who kind of berated you, constantly? Even if maybe they had like good intentions to try to get you to think better and to be your best self, it doesn't feel good, right? To cultivate or to hold on to a relationship in which you feel really emotionally scarred by. And so, for sure, there are. Those are some of the reasons I think people wouldn't hold on to those relationships. And I think other people, I do try to encourage people, don't like be dependent on your advisor. Really try to have a team of people who are supporting you. When I was in grad school, my advisor was amazing in many ways. And there were ways in which like he wasn't really helpful to me. And so I reached out to other professors. I also reached out to a lot of professors who are emeriti or emeritus status, because they really wanted to engage with students. Like, they were kind of at the part of their career where their legacy is what they're able to pass down to next generations. And so I had coffee with several professors who were like in their 80s and their 90s. And they would read my work and they would give me feedback, and they were like such amazing sources of wisdom. And I didn't have those kinds of like, those power dynamics weren't there in a way, because they had nothing to prove and they had a lot of time for me. So yeah, my advice to people is like, if your relationship with your advisor is not working out, like, make sure you are really diversifying the people who are on your team. And hopefully those relationships will carry on as you pursue your career, regardless of whether you stay in academia or not.
Louise O'Brien, welcome to PhD London. Thank you so much for being at my guest today. And we were talking previously before the recording that you finished your postdoc, or was partially finished, and now you're doing your all sorts of things. So how now you're managing all of that?
Yeah, it's chaos, really. Firstly, thank you for having me. It's really fun to speak to you and to see you again. It's great to see you.
My pleasure.
It's a little bit chaotic, but I feel like that's academia in a nutshell, isn't it? So I've just finished a research assistant position with the University of Tübingen, which was absolutely fantastic, and the opportunities I got from it were amazing. And now I'm still working on a few publications from that are going to be hopefully published in the next 12 to 18 months, hopefully, depending on, because it's part of a much larger international project. So I'm just this tiny little cog in a huge wheel that seems to be turning rapidly, it feels like. So yeah, it's scary but fascinating, I feel, because now I'm back to academia, museums, getting back to normality, it feels like.
Yeah, it's quite of this wave of uncertainties and not knowing what will happen next, but at the same time it feels exciting to know, okay, so I finished this level, I finished this postdoc in this case, and what is going to happen, what shall I do? And for that is trying to keep yourself active and trying to go work around and doing some other things. You were telling you're doing your baking, You're doing your publications, which we can ask now. What sort of publications are you currently writing on?
Yeah, so I've got a review article with Antiquity that's coming out in the next couple of months, I think. I only submitted it the other day. I don't know how long it'll take at the moment.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about that because the book I'm reviewing is something that's very close to my PhD, and it's great to have been able to have a look at it. I've also got a project that I'm doing with colleagues at Liverpool and Leeds, which is we call it Luxon. That's our kind of like acronym for it. I'm not saying we forced the acronym, but we've really tried. So it's luminescence and ultraviolet examination of objects network. And basically we're developing sort of low cost, accessible techniques using modified cameras so that we can have kind of the multispectral imaging that you get, say, with much higher spec sort of systems in a much more accessible way, to the point that perhaps you don't even need Wi-Fi, you don't need kind of that huge setup that's not as portable. So we're currently still experimenting with that. We did a workshop last year funded by the University of Liverpool Midas Fund, which was great because it was kind of the seed fund for this project. So we're now working on publications that resulted from that workshop. So I'm sort of like the resident Egyptologist for that project because my colleagues are archaeological scientists, medievalists. So my colleague who's a medievalist is really interested in like medieval manuscripts and how we can improve readability with UV and kind of with ultraviolet and kind of infrared. Whereas I'm like, I want to see what I can read on a stela, and I want to see if we can do kind of pigment analysis. So that kind of stemmed from things I was doing with mummy portraits in particular. And then what else am I doing? I have contributions to an edited publication coming out hopefully in the new year with the Lives and Literacy in Ancient Egypt exhibition, which is in collaboration with the Rylands Library in Manchester. The exhibition itself is currently on display in Texas, at the University of Texas, but then it's coming back to the UK to be on display in Manchester, I think, towards the end of next year. So that'll be great. So I just got the proofs back for that. So hopefully that'll be out soon.
So there's so lots of things to do then. So you might be so now after finishing the postdoc, I now have these whole activities to do all in once, and then meeting up deadlines, pressured situations, and then you need to figure it out can you time manage it. And wow, I mean, it must be now a different challenges then.
Absolutely, yeah.
It looked like you've been on a postdoc, and then you were about to finish it, and then you have most things to do.
Yeah, it's strange because I feel like the being at Tübingen was almost like a calm period because I was just working on one thing, and I was working on this project, Die Bildostraka as Athribis, and it was just looking at these ostraca, so I could really laser focus in. And now I'm like, oh no, now all the other things that I put to one side while I was doing are coming back to bite me. Like even the PhD book, I'm like, oh yeah, about that. I should probably start working on that now. So it's kind of, it's good to have so much to do, but I'm also like, wow, I said yes to a lot of things.
Yeah, indeed. That looking back as well as a PhD and now post PhD, I'm just waiting for the graduation ceremony. Then, oh my God, I have so much things to do. Now I'm just dealing with looking for jobs, of course, and doing this podcast as well, and all sorts of things. It seems like everything we're trying to find something to work on and to avoid being stopped in time, basically. And then I think that's with PhD and also with postdoc. I think it's just such an incredible thing of where we can grab something to have an idea and then trying to develop it. How can we market it, and how does that fulfill our own oneselves, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. It's sort of the reason why I ended up where I did, whether it be research, academia, museums, is because I'm a very indecisive person. I don't like to stand still, which is to my detriment, I will admit, because then I end up with these situations where I'm like doing all these different things and going, oh no. But yeah, because I'm one of those people that like, I don't like to just do research. I love to teach at the same time. I love to do museums work at the same time. And I'm going, I'm in so many places at once, but I like it.
Yes.
As chaotic as it can be.
So another thing as well, Louise, because you're saying that you're doing the publications and then you're doing these projects alongside with Leeds University. Does that coincide with the upcoming Late Antique and Medieval Conference happening actually at Leeds?
Oh, the IMC?
Yes.
We were going to present. I have a couple of colleagues who are presenting at the IMC, but on separate projects, but they are the same colleagues. So we're kind of all in our respective fields doing multiple things and making those connections at the same time as also having sort of side hustle of we do multispectral imaging. So it's great because we have so many friends who are like, oh, I have these objects I really want looking at. Can you do this? And we're like, hey, if you let us publish them, we're there. So it's great when it comes to those connections, because so many medievalists have manuscripts they can't read because they're just so damaged or because they're so old. So many archaeologists have objects that have pigment that we can't see with the naked eye, for example. So that's where I'm really interested, kind of those pigments that once you put them through the filters and through the technology, suddenly it becomes technicolor.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Moreover, writing feedback also pushes the supervisor to communicate better with the student if they write it in an oriented-based way, in the sense that it has to be professional and academic, which teaches the student to figure out a different approach to address the argument, reflecting too if the supervisor discusses the feedback verbally with the student. The more feedback the supervisor gives in a research proposal, but from an oriented-based, as well as balanced and constructive perspective, the more the student is likely to engage with and figure out alternative ways to address the academic gap while writing the research proposal effectively to submit it afterwards.
Yeah, I do believe that the whole thing, this wholesome, then becomes more of a technical side, and then if we are not on the field, then we are not knowledgeable of what's this. We may have just like a small percentage, but at the same time, not having the necessary academic training, then becomes even more hard, I'd say.
I mean, that's what's so interesting about the project, because I am not a scientist in any shape or form, but I know a decent amount about kind of pigment analysis just from my research, because it sort of coincides. What I see is a lot of times there is this disconnect between the technology and the interpretation. And I think there's an opportunity there to go, okay, we have the results. What do you do with them then? Because there's so many great results out there. And I'm sitting here as someone who's more of a historian going, I can help you draw those connections. So it's really interesting.
Oh, well. And speaking of these projects and all of that, looking back to me and you, what we've done with the panel, and also when we've met each other at Liverpool with the conference, how did you find it? Was the experience? What did you notice so differently, or maybe something that it's just another day at the office? Don't know.
I mean, Track 2025 was so fun. It was very much we sort of put it together, not necessarily on a whim, but it was very much we have this opportunity to do something really fun. And I'm so glad it went so well, because the panel, I think, spoke to both of our research interests. It was called Beyond Binaries, and I think both of us really advocate for that in history and archaeology and Egyptology. I mean, the panelists we got were amazing. Some of the panels were completely different to what I thought we might get, which was so fun, because it really broadened our horizons, I feel. And it just shows how broad-ranging that sort of theme of cultural interactions can be. It's Rome, Egypt, Greece. It can go even further, particularly when it comes to things like, I mean, we had one presenter who did about Ireland, and I was like, I've never thought about that. It was fascinating.
Yeah. I do still remember a few of them. I might have even some of the notes in there. But I kind of like this. Well, first it was the gaming style interaction. We would go with shit. I'm being a kid again, and it's like going around and it's like interacting with the other guests and climbing up stories through a virtual building, and it's just going roaming around and to find your own panel. The panel was amazing, was fine. I shouldn't say this, but there was instances whilst I was hosting and hearing, I was about to fall asleep. Not because the themes were so exciting, but standing here for 20 plus minutes, and then I'm about to sleep. I'm about to close my eyes, and it's, oh my god, I don't want to do this. And then there was this moment when I closed my eyes for a few seconds, with a speaker about to finish, and then when the speaker finished, and I just woke up and said, oh fuck. I fell asleep for a bit, and then I said, "Did I have any questions?" and all sorts of things that came out. I didn't have any single question to ask, but I'd say that the panel we've done was amazing. What we've built, and also it was great to know some people. But at the same time, I had this kind of feeling that I woke up so early, and then all of a sudden, this comfortable chair that I'm sitting right now gives me that. Gives me that sleeping time moment, and so, so it was a bit embarrassing to me. But at the same time, it was a great panel.
I think I've definitely had those feelings in person conferences, especially when it's a long flight. Yeah. Oh gosh, I had a conference years ago where we had a 3 a.m. flight, and so we got through the day, and it was mainly just like an introductory drinks reception and keynote, and I was like, should I go to the drinks reception? Well, I do want to see people and say hello. Yeah. So I was like, well, I can't go to the drinks reception without going to the keynote. And I remember sitting there going, this is so interesting, but my body was like, you have been awake too long. And I was like, I should have taken a nap in there. Because I was like, I really don't want to be that person who's sitting there completely flagging. Yeah. But I was like, just get me to the drinks reception. I'll find something with sugar in it. I would get my second wind. But it was because it was a really warm, it was the middle of summer as well. So when it's so warm, you're just sitting there going, lovely, I'm too comfortable. I need around because they've done too good of a job here because I don't want to move now.
But that was that in Tübingen, or was it somewhere else?
No, I think it might have been in Switzerland. But it was so early, and I love international conferences, but I'm not a morning person. So if I have a flight at 3 a.m. or 6 a.m., I'm like, no, please. I will always take the 1 p.m. flight over the 8 a.m.
Yeah. I mean, so it's reasonable to say, but a flight at 3 a.m. I never thought about that. I only know about 8, 6, 7 a.m. So I had also took one before, back to my home country when I was admitted to my master's, and then I flew from Berlin. I stopped in Belgium and I slept there, and then going back to Faro. Yeah, it took me quite a while, so I had to sleep. I slept to sleep over
gosh.
Yeah, the chairs were uncomfortable. But I need to find something. I need to find some chairs that didn't have any arms and it was spacious. So, but luckily I found something. Anyway.
Yeah. I had that in Egypt recently when I was on site. Honestly, best experience ever because I'd never been to Egypt, so it was like my first time.
Right.
My flight had been delayed at Manchester. Everything Manchester Airport. It's not great. And so there was one flight a day, and I was going from Manchester to Cairo and then from Cairo to Luxor. And the Luxor flight was the last flight of the day because it was such a long flight from Cairo to Cairo. Yeah. And they were very much like, okay, we may be delayed by 3 hours, but you're going to make this flight. And I was sitting there going, there's not a chance in hell I'm making this flight. I missed this flight by 20 minutes. It was so close. So I ended up stuck in Cairo airport for, I think, 6. Well, they gave me a hotel, but I was only in the hotel for 2 hours because my next flight was at 5. So I had to be back at the hotel 3 hours later. I don't think I slept for about 36 hours because then I got to, I was going to the site. So there was just not time to nap. Yeah. And I remember thinking, I'm not cut out for that much sleep deprivation. Because I was very much like, this is me. I didn't want to miss anything because it was my first time. I was like, I want to see everything. I want to finally see this place I've studied for so long. But I remember thinking, I need the sleep. I was running on fumes.
So that also happened during when you went to Egypt, that also happened when you had to fall asleep in the midst of an event?
No, luckily I was going to the dig site in Athribis, so luckily that wasn't an event. But I remember thinking, just the lack of sleep that I was having. I was thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. the next day to start work. Somehow I managed it. I mean, luckily when I arrived, the day off was basically 2 days after I'd arrived, so I basically just slept all day on our day off and did not move.
Yeah.
So I managed to catch up. But I remember the first 2 days were difficult. I was just, yeah. Luckily, because I had that sort of adrenaline of, oh my gosh, I'm here, I'm actually doing this. But if it hadn't been for that, I was like, I don't know how I managed it.
Oh my gosh. I mean, all to sum up is just part of both the PhD and obviously the postdoc experiences. So this is all the best thing we can have as students.
Yeah, just advice to any student: have a sleep schedule.
Yeah.
Have some sort of plan. Learn to nap.
Yeah, I think we should have like any training for that, napping in PhD and postdoc. As long there is funding for that, of course. So changing for nappings, and you've obviously, or more than likely, you had loads and loads of napping sessions during your PhD. But I wanted to know first and foremost, why having this interest in Egyptology, and that led you to go for both your PhD and your postdoc. And tell me a bit about what differences did you find on both degrees?
I mean, Egyptology was a weird one because it very much happened the way that many Egyptologists, it turns out, have got into Egyptology, which it all started with a big gold book. In fact, it's currently propping up my laptop right now. So when I was like 6 or 7, I went to like a school fete or something, and there was like a stall with loads of books, and I was a big reader. And there was this huge gold book, which was literally just called Egyptology. And I never really looked at Egyptian history or anything like that. I wasn't like into it particularly, but I was just fascinated by this big shiny book. And I did enjoy Greek myth because I loved the Clash of the Titans film, the Harryhausen. I think that was my favorite film. I was obsessed with that film. And so I think somewhere in my brain, Egyptology, I recognized it as sort of akin to Greek myth and ancient history. And I ended up buying this book for like £2. And it's an amazing book. And I will say, if you ask any Egyptology cohort, chances are at least half of them will have owned this book because it's still in museum shops today. Okay. So I feel like someone needs to write to the author and say, do you know you birthed a generation of Egyptologists? Because it's literally just this story of an archaeologist, I think Amelia Sands, I think her name is, trying to find the lost tomb of Osiris. But it's a very interactive book. It's got like a mini Senate board. It's got like stickers and things. So it's a very tactile book, but it is actually very informative. It's got kind of the layers of Tutankhamun's coffins and how to write Egyptian hieroglyphs, for example. So it's that sort of started the obsession. And then, like many people who love ancient history, I read the Percy Jackson books. Yeah, I ended up, we had like at my school, we had an initiative where if you were year 7 when you were 11, they give you a free book when you started school. So I just picked that because I went, Greek myth, read it, got obsessed. Then he brought out an Ancient Egypt series, The Kane Chronicles. That kind of circled me back to Ancient Egypt again. And I kind of didn't really engage much with Egyptology at all because I didn't know it was a field. I didn't know you could do it as a job beyond fiction, really. You know, I was obsessed with the art. I did like my art GCSE based around Egyptian art. And I ended up at Liverpool simply because I realized they did Egyptology. I'd applied actually to do ancient history, I think classical studies. And I went to an open day and I was like, hang on a minute, they have a talk on Egyptology. I can do Egyptology. This is real. Like I can go to classes about this thing I'm obsessed with. And like the sheer joy of it And I mean, the great thing about Liverpool was that there was flexibility. I mentioned I'm a very indecisive person. I didn't want to commit one way or another to classics or Egyptology. So, and I actually met on my first open day there a lecturer who ended up being the person who examined my PhD, who basically said to me, well, why don't you do both? You can do 50-50 and have the best of both worlds. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And that sort of started the obsession, because again, I thought Egyptology would just be this nice little thing on the side. I would do some hieroglyphs because that's fun. But I thought classical studies and ancient history was the way I was going to go. And it ended up being the complete opposite. I got in there and I became obsessed with ancient Egypt and with this idea of being able to study these people. And that sort of fueled it. I did my MA because I felt that I wasn't done. I really enjoyed the dissertation part of my degree. And the reason why I particularly enjoyed my degree was that sort of way I could do two sides to it. You know, I was really interested in Greco-Roman Egypt, and I could use both halves of my degree to write this dissertation. But with that dissertation, I was really looking into something you're very familiar with, third space and kind of cultural interactions. And I felt like the research I'd done was just a tiny snapshot of what could be done. And that's sort of why I ended up doing the MA. And my initial plan was to not go any further than that. I put in an application for the PhD, but I had no intention of doing it because I hadn't got funding. I had applied for funding, but I hadn't got Research Council funding. And this was in the middle of COVID as well. So I was like, I was very much like, I've done the MA, I'm happy. Now I'm going to go get a proper job. And that's sort of where it started going both wrong and right, depending on your perspective, because I ended up being offered a job with the National Archives. But that was in, when was it? Was it June 2020? And there was sort of this, at the time, particularly with COVID, there was this sense that eventually things were going to change. Eventually we were going to not be locked down. And then that didn't happen. It just kept going and kept going. So the job got rescinded because it was a job that had a lot of travel. It was just not going to happen. And they were kind of like, there's no point in us dragging you along like this when you could be out there applying for other jobs which would suit you better. But the day after that happened, I got an email saying I have full funding for my PhD.
Oh, wow.
Which was, now that I look at it, I'm like, that's insane. Like, one door closes, another one opens, quite literally. And so I kind of was like, well, why not? I've nothing to lose. I'm not leaving the house. So I was like,
for being unsure to not expecting that you would get into the PhD without any funding, and then on a shift of winds, then the funding just came up after looking for jobs, basically, and you having something that it was already almost ready, so to speak, and then you had this change, and then and
wow. And I'm not a superstitious person, but I am a believer in if it's meant to be, it will happen. So I'm not one of those people, like, I wasn't massively upset about the fact that the job had fallen through, because I was like, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. But then for, less than 24 hours later to then get this email going, hey, do you want 3 years of funding? And I'm going, well, maybe it's meant to be.
Well, I say, wait, I'm getting funded, so why not? I can do many things with the funding.
Yeah, exactly. And I was kind of, because I was still doing the MA at that point, because it was June 2020 and my MA finished. So I loved lockdown in the summer of 2020 because I just wrote the dissertation and didn't leave the house. It was great. But I was coming to an end of the MA kind of in, I think it was end of September, and the offer for the PhD was the end of September. It was like the beginning of October. And I was thinking, well, I could go straight into this PhD, with 10 days between the MA and the PhD. And I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I was like, that's not going to be healthy for you. Have a break. So I deferred it to the January just because I thought, I want to know what it's like to not be in education for 5 minutes. I feel like I needed time to do other things, even if it was just like write publications that might not never get published, or, do hobbies, because hobbies were not a thing at that point. And that's sort of when the baking started, because I was like, oh my gosh, I have time to do things and to be normal. And I ended up working for a museum in Preston as a social media manager for a bit. And it was nice to just have like a normal job, like to just have that moment of, this is what it's like. It's not constant, like having just set hours to work was great, you know, because you know how it is. You're thinking 24/7.
Yeah.
And then going into something that was a bit more normal, even if it was sort of academia adjacent, it was great to just be like, oh, I'm only thinking about one thing between these hours, and that's it. So that was very novel. And then I jumped straight back into a PhD.
So we're going back with the differences between, we're going to later for the differences between your postdoc and your PhD. But I want to ask this one. What was the first thing you've done in your first year of your PhD when you got the funding?
Oh, I bought a new phone. That's what I remember. I got my first payment and I bought a new phone because my old phone was on its last legs. And I was like, it would be so nice to have something, because I didn't have a smartphone. Well, it was a smartphone, but it was very like poor smartphone. And I was like, I'm going to buy an actual phone that works. And it wasn't like a top of the range or anything. It was just a good smartphone. And I was like, wow. Because I also really wanted a good camera, but I didn't want to have to buy like a DSLR. Because I was like, that's out of my league. But I wanted something because I knew I'd be taking a lot of photos. So because at the time I was a social media manager as well, I was like, I'm going to have to start using it properly. So I did. Once I got the funding, I got a new phone. Because that was like the first thing I was like, this is probably something I should spend my money on. And then as soon as I actually got started with the PhD, it was so weird because it was still in COVID. So I sort of just sat down at my desk and was like, okay, this is day one. What do I do? Because no one tells you. No one says this is what you do. Not even your supervisors, because they're just that sort of advice. Yeah, like I had an idea and I had a proposal, which completely went to the side. The PhD, nothing to proposal now. But that's kind of the fun of a PhD, I think. I think if the PhD you write is the one you propose, like you've learned as much. I feel like you have to have that chance to kind of grow and change. But yeah, I remember sitting down and going, okay, let's start reading, figure this out. And I sort of used my MA as my sort of jumping off point and went, okay, what did I want to do in that MA that I never got the space or the time to do? What did I want to read that I never had the time to do, and sort of started from there. But yeah, it was certainly weird because for the first 10 months, I didn't have like a desk space on campus. I couldn't go to campus because we were in COVID. So yeah.
Wow. So that if I had funding, I would certainly buy something fancy. I didn't have. I was self-funded, and when I got my job at working at a restaurant flipping chicken, we know already it's Nando's, but that was my financial backbone, which it still is, but it is something. I didn't know nothing about funding, and I couldn't find anything. I only knew about funding through annual research trips to go to Oxford. Swansea University sponsored that. Literally, that's the only thing I've known so far. But it's good to think that's like using a bit of your funding just to invest on something that will going to be personal, and then just moving on with other things related to the research. Did you also use it for any trips that you went abroad? You were talking about Switzerland, so did you use the funding for that trip?
Yeah, so I was really lucky in that I had both the funding, kind of the tuition. Well, I say tuition. I always think it's a strange word for a PhD because you're the one doing the tutoring half the time.
Yes.
But the fees and the stipend, and then a bit like you said about Swansea, Liverpool also offers what do they call it? Like a travel expenses. So they would cover a certain amount of, say, flights or hotel for either conference or a research trip. So where did I go in my first year? I didn't really go many places the first year because of COVID. But then in kind of the second and third year, I started kind of getting more on the conference circuit. So I went to Basel in Switzerland for CRE, current research in Egyptology. That was kind of my first international conference. That was brilliant. because it was my first international presentation as well. So it was very nerve-wracking, but it was really fun.
Mhm.
And then I've done Rome, the European Association of Archaeologists. That was so warm. It was like 40. It was the middle of August in Rome. It was so hot. But that was amazing because I had the funding, I was able to extend it beyond just the kind of the 4 days of the conference. So I arrived a bit earlier and managed to get to see like the Colosseum and the Pantheon, which was great because I'd never been to Italy, let alone to Rome. Where else have I been? I'm trying to think now. Obviously, now I've been to Germany a lot because that's where my book's based. Yeah, and then things like research trips to London quite a lot, particularly to the British Museum, because a lot of the portraits that I look at are based there. Also to the Petrie Museum, where they've sort of got the largest collection of them. So I was really lucky that a lot of that was covered, travel expenses wise.
Oh wow! So excuse me. Lots of things to do then with the funding, which is great. And then, did you apply for more funding when you started your postdoc?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Now, for the bonus, stand-up comedy. That's right. You can participate in stand-ups and share your research by mixing it with humor and satire. It's an alternative yet bold to engage your thesis towards lay audiences, where a strong reading of the room, your personality, and human connection are a must to boost your confidence and communication.
No, so I was kind of lucky in that I ended up being offered the research assistant post prior to the end of my PhD, so I sort of knew that was coming. And then once I started the role, then I started applying for things like Leverhulme, mainly just like research and teaching posts a lot of the time, because the time I felt like all of my effort and all of my brain power was going on this one role and these publications. So I wanted to spend time doing that before I started looking at my other ideas, my sort of research projects. So I'm still sort of, they're not on the back burner now. I'm finally kind of getting back around to them. So it's nice to like, I have time for ideas again. That's what it feels like.
I see. So, and the postdoc is around the same subject as you said previously, the one as doing your PhD. So in this case, what differences did you find between PhD and postdoc?
Well, so the research assistant post was actually on. It's kind of interesting because it's sort of similar but different. So my PhD was on mummy portraits, thinking about how hybrid art and syncretic art is conceptualized, but also how we can figure out who these people were, because a lot of the time they have no context because of various colonial archaeologists. And also what that tells us about how we interpret them now. So their treatment in museums, their treatment in kind of art galleries, and whether they should be in one or the other or both. And sort of really advocating for a holistic approach that kind of combines classics, Egyptology, archaeology, because a lot of the times when people look at those objects, they think of them as one or the other. And actually, they're all of those things at once. You can't really separate them out into different parts and different labels. But when it comes to my postdoctoral work, the project at the University of Tübingen is called the Athribis project. It's this Middle Egyptian site called Athribis or Atrip. And it's essentially the temple of the goddess Repi, who was this kind of lioness goddess who was married to Min, who was the god of the city of Akhmin. And then they had a son, Calanthes. So this temple was excavated over the past, I think, 12 to 15 years. They've been working on it for a really long time. Really, the temple itself is beautiful. It's fully excavated now. But what they've been finding is so many ostraca. I think this year it's 43,000 they hit. I remember seeing the press release for it and going, wow, that's a lot. It's so many. And most of them, ostraca are tiny little, well, not always tiny, shards of pottery that are inscribed. The majority of them are inscribed with Demotic or Greek. There's also a few Coptic. I think there's a couple of Arabic ones as well. And they date from between the Ptolemaic period well up into through the Roman times, through Coptic, and even into kind of the medieval era, because this temple was reused. So we think it was built during the Ptolemaic times, and then it was still used into Roman times. We have artwork of Nero and Hadrian, but then we also have evidence of its reuse. So it was reused as a monastery for female monks, which links to the nearby red and white monasteries with the Appa Shinute. But then we also get its reuse again, kind of more during medieval times, where it's used for like stabling animals, and it's used essentially just as a place to put things. So it's had a very interesting life, because it started out as this very, pagan religious site, and then it's reused in a Christian context and then eventually abandoned. But there's also another temple, the Pylon Temple, which is still being excavated, and then possibly an even further temple, because all of this is essentially built in the shadow of a mountain. And it seems like there may have been some structure built into the mountain as well. And so all of this is sort of underscored by these ostraca, which just keep turning up. I mean, there's thousands upon thousands. And the project that I worked on was really looking at imagery, so figured ostraca. The ones that I was looking at particular were representations of humans. So I think it's a stretch to call it portraiture, but it's, drawings of faces. And what we can tell about them, because part of the problem is that all of these ostraca mainly come from rubbish dumps. So the Sebekine, who were kind of much later, so we're talking like, I think, 18th, 19th century, they were essentially going to the site and taking unfired mud brick, because it was a great fertilizer for the soil. So they likely were finding all of these objects and finding all of these ostraca, and they essentially discarded them. So then we just keep finding these caches of ostraca where they have essentially discarded them into the site. So it's really interesting. And I'm looking at what we can tell about artistic precedents when it comes to the people who are drawn there, because some of them are actually like copied from the temple walls. So they might link to the scribal school, because we know that scribes were educated there from the text that we have. So yeah, it's really interesting.
And speaking of, because it was monastery, then there was loads of copies, handwritten copies, and then we don't know whether it is quite accurate or not, right?
Yeah, there's so much.
But it is fascinating, because you told me you explore particularly Roman Egyptian portraiture, but it's so fascinating at the same time. The multitude of cultures that has been interacting throughout the centuries, talking from Ptolemaics, let's say the Coptic language, even the Nubian kingdom that was nearby the Ptolemies, and then the Roman intervention, and this multitude of cultures evidenced by the inscriptions that were left there, including the rest of the material culture objects. And so I believe it is fascinating, that specific geographical area. I would say also with my research about the Near East, and using the same terminologies as you use as well. But I do wonder as well, how fascinating is Roman Egyptian portraiture? We know, both of us know already, that those portraits are rather idealized, but for the general audience who's trying to understand a bit of the context, could you give to us what is so fascinating about them?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Well, as I tend to see it, the whole point of a presentation is to make your audience see something that they didn't see before, right? And hopefully in a profound way, because if it's just an easy announcement that's not difficult to explain, why not just send a simple email or write a short memo about it? So the whole point of making a presentation or preparing a larger piece of communication is to make your audience see something that they didn't see before. And that means that means a couple of steps that are immediately derived from that. First of all, you need clarity about what is that actually? What do I need them to see? And you'd be surprised to learn how few people, not exclusively, but particularly in the science community, wouldn't be able to say that, to give a concise answer to that. So what is it that you actually want your audience to see? So, and once you've nailed that or have clarity for yourself what that is, you can ask the second question. So why don't they see it already? What do they see? What do they see that I don't? And what do they miss that I see already? And once you have that, you can kind of build a path between those 2 points. And the ultimate goal of a presentation is to lead them to what I would call the point of no return, which would probably coincide with that aha moment where you've told them everything that helps them really see what you wanted to make them see, where there is no going back for them because they've seen it in a way that they cannot unsee it anymore, and where it makes total sense because you've explained it in a way that makes sense, using words that they can understand, using images and metaphors that they are familiar with.
Yes, something that is more exactly. It's more something that they are more familiar with. Something that is more common as they've seen, whether on TV or on YouTube. Something, in a sense, it's more of a touristic point of view. It's kind of like when they go to an event, they're attending a speaker. And you feel like I'm a tourist here and I want to hear what you have to say. And then something comes up and they say something that sparks them and I say, aha, that's what I want to know. And so basically,
and that is that is a great approach, and that is so starkly different to what most people do. So most people, when I ask them how they would go about preparing a presentation, they tell me similar things. They first of all, they'd start with a presentation that they've already given a couple of weeks ago, and then they fill up all the other details that have come up since, and so until they discover, whoa, that's way too much information for 25 minutes. And then they start cutting and it's still too much. And so basically they have that problem of overwhelming their audience because there are so many things that are interesting and great and fascinating about my field, which makes sense. I mean, you're doing a PhD about it. You're researching 5 years on it. Of course, there's more interesting things to say about it than you've got time to say it.
Yes.
But that approach that you've outlined is a very different approach, where you basically turn that upside down and you don't even bother about all the things that you can say, but only ask yourself, what is that one thing that makes that tourist look over, come closer, and think to themselves, well, that is interesting. I want to know more about that.
Sure.
And so getting clarity and starting there. So what is that one thing? And often it's really literally one thing only.
Yeah, I mean, I think their sheer uniqueness is what really draws people to them initially, because they are very enigmatic, and I think we recognize something of ourselves in them because they're so naturalistic. Because if you compare kind of Roman Egyptian mummy portraits to what came before, we have these 3,000 plus years of Egyptian art. But particularly in the 19th and 20th centuries, the fascination with mummy portraits comes in because the Western world recognizes it as art that's similar to their own, for better or for worse, that is, because the techniques that are used are so naturalistic. And that doesn't make them any more or less beautiful than what came before, but the fact that you can look someone in the eye and recognize them and kind of have that connection with them, I think is really poignant in comparison, because they're almost photographic. Every time I do a talk about them, people say like, oh, well, that person looks like someone I know, that, or like genuinely, I've had people come up to me and say, oh, well, that guy looks like Mo Salah from Liverpool. Okay, like because of the hairstyle and the way that people look, and I'm like, it's much easier for particularly people in the West to look at art that looks similar to what we know. And I think there's that recognition there, particularly because the techniques that are used were then used by Renaissance artists. So we have that recognition of, oh, well, this looks like something Da Vinci did or Michelangelo did. I mean, when they were originally discovered, they kind of the consensus was that they were kind of this missing link in the history of portraiture. I'm not entirely convinced by that, but there is that recognition there. But what I find so interesting is that those cultural interactions, because there are only, about 1,000 of these portraits in the world, and they only come from this one sort of specific region. I mean, we have some from slightly outside, but generally they're very specific to this region, and they only really appear for about 300 years of history. So it's like, what is going on in this region that's so culturally significant, whether it be the artistic techniques, the materials available? There's this like perfect storm that's happening in the Fayum that creates this environment that these people are able to do this. And, I have my own theories about why they did it, but there's clearly that element of personal choice. People are choosing to be depicted in this way, despite the fact that you could have a plethora of different sort of commemoration methods. So it's a very poignant way of being remembered, I think, particularly because there's that sort of link to immortality and the idea that you don't die a second death if you are remembered forever.
I mean, it makes a good point, Louise, because if you see like the way how they wanted to portray themselves and say this sense of immortality through a pictorial depiction, right? This also comes to the influence of showing social status with Roman elite, Ptolemaic elite, right? But at the same time, this multitude of fruit that come from cultural interactions, if you gotta see the context, that was a huge market hub, right? In cities like Alexandria or even in Palmyra, and many people of the ancient world at the time, they would focus and they would encounter into those marketplaces, and there was this sort of diversity that existed in those marketplaces, and people from Jewish culture, from Egyptian culture, from Greek culture, they would mingle themselves, they would interact, mingle their own cultures, they would receive different types of cultural characteristics and then implement into their own context with their own knowledge, with their own technique. And I think that's also brings the fact that these depictions on Roman portraiture, which we are rather used to see on the telly or online, in this case, the portraits of Tutankhamun or even the famous bust of Nefertiti, which for me, I was lucky to see the original one in Berlin while I lived there. And if you guys have the opportunity, there's the museum night in August. It's really good, by the way. No advertisement intended. And so those I think that's also what makes it fascinating, and the context, as you said, also does really matter.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so interesting, because, like you said, cities like Alexandria have this sort of metropolitan situation going on, but the Fayum as well. It's an oasis. To an extent, it's a man-made oasis, because there's canals that were dug from the Nile to Lake Karun, which created this fertile land, which only really happened during the Ptolemaic period. So and that was done so that Greco-Macedonian mercenaries could settle in that land. So it's almost a man-made melting pot. These mercenaries and these people were settled there because they were gifted this land, and you get that natural integration between peoples and between cultures. And that, I think, is what is perhaps portrayed quite nicely in these portraits, because you're getting a sense of just how selective people can be with how they want to be portrayed. They're mummified at the end of the day. They have these Egyptian beliefs, but when you look at the portraits in isolation, you recognize those classical elements. And I think perhaps that's what's been a problem in particularly 200 years, because a lot of the time people have just looked at the portraits in isolation, when actually the entire mummy is something that should be looked at and celebrated, particularly because of that separation.
Yeah, I think that's also a valid point, and just like how the process and of mummification, and how it's the portrait representation of it, and then how it's depicted afterwards, because what we see is what comes afterwards, is it? So, and because of that, talking about context, how we perceive that, how the public eye perceives it, I do wonder, and I watched this on social media. I watched the whole video on YouTube long time ago, I think it was weeks after you've released it on your Instagram and YouTube, about you telling in your postdoc project, telling about lives in literacy in ancient Egypt. How was it to present? What was it like to be on set and tell to a broader audience who isn't knowledgeable about Roman portraiture in Egypt? How was it like?
Yeah, it was really fun. So this is the Lives and Literacy in Ancient Egypt exhibition that I mentioned before, that's in Texas at the moment. But it's really an initiative that started with Jeremy Penner at the University of Manchester, the Rylands Library, because the Rylands has this fascinating papyrological collection. Mm-hmm. So it was really just great to be able to get those papyri out, and they're now on display. But the fun thing about the Lives and Literary exhibition is that they include portraiture as well from Manchester Museum, which I'm very well acquainted with. I did a research visit there during my PhD, so I really got hands-on with these portraits. So it was great to be able to sort of make use of that research. The actual process itself was really interesting because it started out as just the publication, just the book, which should be coming in the next sort of, hopefully in the new year. But then there was this desire to have a bit more visual engagement, particularly because the portraits are so beautiful and because the papyri are, we have them, which is great. It's better than just showing photos of them. So it was really fun to sort of have that experience of, firstly, being with everyone on the day. We had a filming day in Rylands. I think it was February. It was January or February, end of January, beginning of February. And I have never done any kind of TV work, any kind of filming. I was terrified. I was like, so badly, I will just stumble over my words. It won't happen. But what I have done is quite a bit of kind of public lecturing and guest lectures. So I feel like I've got a good grasp of being able to condense my research down for a broader audience, particularly because I do so much museum work. You've got to be really good at adapting when it comes to museum tours, because you will get questions from people that, I mean, have you even worked in a museum with Egyptian artifacts? You don't get the aliens question.
That's always the case. Even with children. Even with children, I gotta say that too, because even popular. Go on, and I'll explain. I'll explain a bit later.
It's so you've got to be really adaptable with that. When it comes to TV, it's kind of a balancing act. You want to firstly be able to condense 5 years worth of research into 5 minutes, which is difficult. But then you also want to have that balancing act of being authoritative and being informative, but not overwhelming the viewer, because you know that many people who'll be viewing it in the exhibition won't have that prior knowledge. So you don't want to start using terms they don't know, but you also don't want to not be technical, because you don't want to come across as too informal. So that balance is really difficult, but the filming itself was brilliant. The company that did it was called Eastern Bloc. The guys were amazing. They gave me the best backdrop. Like, I had the backdrop of Rylands Library, and the setup was great. And they were just like, we're just going to sit you here. You just talk and we'll work through it.
Looking at the teleprompter and the...
No teleprompter.
No teleprompter?
Yeah. No, which was slightly terrifying because I had like notes, but it's one of those things that as soon as you sit down, everything evaporates and you just talk and hope that it makes sense. Luckily, I think public lecturing probably gave me this sort of skill of like, I can just rattle it out, I feel. It was kind of a blur. I was just like, okay, go. And then they're like, yeah, that's great. I was like, oh, I made sense. And they were like, yeah, we'll do another take just in case, but like, don't worry. I was like, oh, amazing because it very much. I felt like I built it up quite a lot in my mind, and then I did it. I was like, oh, this is actually really enjoyable.
Yeah, they would then they will be able to edit. So how many attempts did you have?
Oh, only 2.
Only
which
2
was-
attempts.
and-
That's perfect.
I know. I was like, oh, I'm gonna need at least because they allocated like half an hour, 45 minutes per person. I was like, I'm all of this time. Like it's gonna be touch and go. And because I was one of the only people who didn't have the objects with me, because of course the portraits are in Manchester Museum and we were at the Royal Isles Library. So I was having to remember what these portraits look like and go, okay, well, she wears a emerald necklace, or at least what we think is an emerald necklace. And I was kind of, once I hit the key points, I was like, I know my descriptors, and then really get into the context. But yeah, it was really fun.
Oh, nice. I think even on that time frame, you get so pressured, and it's okay. I need to nail this. So you nail it at a second try, and so that is really impressive. But I mean, being on the set and then just sharing what you know, sharing your knowledge is so amazing. But at the same time, as you said it right. You have to have that balance, and maybe adding a bit of representational skills, to disseminate your knowledge appropriately to a certain audience. And the skill know your audience, you'll develop that during your PhD. And even if you had public speaking events before, during your undergraduate, during your master's, I mean, in events in the sense of, you have to do an oral presentation to the whole class, and you talk about this specific portrait of Agrippina in Roman Egypt, and then you have to present that. And I think that's a great skill that should develop as arts and humanities students, but at the same time as well, using those representational skills to talk about that certain aspect towards children, teenagers, adults. It's so fascinating. I was saying I wanted to also to give that, because you spoke about aliens, and I had that as well. But I had this one. It was so funny because I thought it was for primary school children, and this was during my time as a volunteer guide tour at a Roman site in Portugal, and we had to look at the tapestry, the mosaic tapestry of a hallway of the Dominus. And then I asked them, so what shapes do you see here? Like rectangle, rhombuses, triangle, etc. And then one of them just out of the blue said, oh, I see a Renault here. You mean as in the Renault, the symbol car, the symbol, right? And I burst out in I didn't want to break character, but I just had a bit of a laugh. And that's just pointing out Renault. And interestingly, the children saw a Fiat behind them, and then there's a Roman car too. So, oh my god,
amazing!
It's so funny that time was a long time ago. Now you spoke about that, just remember that and looking back, yeah, fun memories. And but as you said, is that type of skill, know your audience, is so important when speaking about history, ancient history in particular, when there's a lot of conspiracy theories around, aliens, false narratives, fake news, misinformation. Is that there's this amplification where the brain of untrained people in ancient history absorbs.
I mean, it's interesting as well how you say untrained, because I found, particularly with my research on the portraits, that also there's, in the history of the portraits at least, there's also this history of people co-opting them for their own purposes. So particularly it's a little bit dark, but in the 1930s and 40s, the portraits were used to perpetuate extreme anti-Semitism, because essentially you had so-called culture historians, kind of people who were working for German politicians at the time, who were essentially trying to prove certain things about race and certain things about ethnicity, and essentially just justify their extreme views using archaeology, but misusing archaeology. And I think that's something that resonates still, because there is in certain fields, particularly when you say about conspiracy theories and everything, people are still misusing aspects of history and aspects of historical artifacts, often for their own views, or even if it's just to get clicks and likes, you know?
Yeah, mostly attention.
Yeah.
That's true. And this is also comes with, you've probably heard of Flint Dibble, because he's teaching at Cardiff. And then he was been on Joe Rogan podcast like 2 years ago, and he was talking about that. And because we're speaking about context and all that, he gave that context of the marketplace through a Greek kylix. I think it was a kylix, or is like not a plate. Can't remember. But yeah, it's just again just telling about that and bring awareness, and also the reason how this inheritance of alienship or conspiracy theories getting into pop culture and saying something 1,000 times it and it becomes true.
Yeah.
So, but
I think
even though you can rebut that, but it's so difficult.
And I think that's why things like public research and public history and open access are so important, because a lot of the time in academia, we are a little bit like an ivory tower at times. And I think the more open access research we can put out is we're giving people the resources and the information to make their own decisions about history and to make their own inferences.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in public history being a tool of public information. Yeah.
I agree with you. Even for those who are history enthusiasts and they don't need to have a degree, but they have a great degree of knowledge to research thoroughly. But the issue is, even with public access, not many people will have that access, or have a limited knowledge of getting to that, or just people that don't know or they don't want to go to seek out to those knowledges, and just stick up in their minds what they actually see and what they hear from those what we call attention seekers.
Yep.
Right. So then what happened afterwards when you did the setting? Just completely okay, you did that and it was all stop, you can have a drink.
Yeah, exactly. I went to lunch. I did actually stay for the day because I was like the second person of the day. So I had colleagues who were also kind of doing filming. So I stayed for the day just to see them for one, because I haven't seen them in a while, because we've all been flitting about across the world. So it was great to be like, oh my God, it's nice to see you. But also just to see their research as well, because it's great reading their research and, chatting over coffee and things, but being able to support your colleagues and support your friends and go, that's my friend, they do really cool stuff. Yeah. That's always amazing. So yeah, it was great to catch up. And then, we got the edits back a while back and kind of the behind the scenes photos. And then, it was published and it's out there and it's at the exhibition now. Which is scary. I mean, in a year it'll be at the Rylands, so it'll be great to see it all together.
Did you see the whole documentary by yourself afterwards?
Yeah, so which was great because some people I obviously were my colleagues, but some I hadn't met before or I hadn't interacted with their research before. So it was great to see just how different sides of research and different sides of the study of the artifacts were, particularly the conservation side as well, because the conservation lab at the Rylands is so sort of important. So seeing that side was really interesting as well.
Wow. So I guess, at the end of the day, it was a great project. And I mean, if any out there listening to, I will put the link on the show notes and then you can have access to it. I believe you also have the link on your Instagram profile, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it should still be there, yeah.
I'll definitely put that. And so, you were mentioning about baking. Did you still baking? Have you heard of the Bake Your Thesis competition before?
So when you mentioned it to me, I looked it up and I was like, I've never seen this before, and I wish I'd have known. I didn't know. I kind of looked it up. I've never heard of it in relation to my institute, and I was like, damn, I wish I'd have known that. That could have been so cool.
Wow. No, we had this in Swansea University once. No, the first time I heard of it was 3 years ago
when I was at the 3MT final at the campus, at Singleton campus. And so they had this bake your thesis competition.
So cool.
And there was like kind of PhDs baking their thesis with their own research. And so I wonder if you had the chance to go to participate in one of those competitions, what cake would you make? And the theme, obviously Roman portraits, but how would you do it?
Oh, I mean, so I will say, I technically, well, I didn't bake it, but I did have my thesis made into a cake for my graduation party. So I had like the actual, like you can print your own cake. So I had that as like the white cake with the front cover of my thesis printed on it, which was very cathartic, being able to stick a knife into the thesis after like 5 years of work. So I highly recommend doing that. It's really fun. But I think I'd probably try and paint a portrait on a cake, because I feel like I'm no professional artist, but I can paint. So I feel like I'd probably do. I mean, my favorite cake's a Victoria sponge. I'm really boring. I'm not a chocolate cake kind of person. So I'd just go with like a really nice Victoria sponge, like fresh cream, strawberries, and then I'd do a big square cake with rectangular cake, and maybe try and paint a portrait on it, because I feel like I know the techniques pretty well, so I'm sure I could get some like cocoa butter and colour it to be the pigments. Yeah. I feel like it could be done.
No, I mean, if you knew about this, it would be really cool to maybe you just could propose Liverpool University to do something, because I'm sure they would do the 3-minute thesis.
Yeah, they do that one.
But they don't do any bake your thesis. That's so weird.
Oh. I'll have to get on with someone.
Maybe you just have to propose, and then let me just swerve a bit, and let me be my PhD student again, and just for that day, and then put your Roman Egypt portraits a themed cake.
Yeah.
Oh no, I think the best out of it, as you say, having these experiences. And these side activities that also fulfill your doctoral experience, your postdoctoral experience. What sorts of other things would you like to try now that you've finished your postdoc and your PhD, in order to keep yourself active, aside from the academic demands and aside from your baking? What sorts of things would you dare to try?
Honestly, I'm so glad that I get to go back to reading again. It sounds really boring, but after you know how it is. You spend 4 or 5 years reading academic text for a living, essentially, and then you're like, finally, I can free up the brain space. I can free up my attention to just lose myself in worlds and lose myself in different books. So that's something I've definitely been wanting to get back into finally, because I have the book collection, I have the TBR list. Finally, I'm starting to work my way through it. But also, I really enjoy my museums work. That's something that no matter what I end up doing, I see myself staying in museums, hopefully, even though sometimes it seems like a more chaotic field than academia. I will admit. But I think that's certainly kind of where my passion lies. My passion is for material culture, and also for like just teaching people about it, whether it be actually, teaching classes or leading sessions, giving tours. It's something that I definitely see myself continuing with.
So students and graduates, we're back after this short break. So Louise, we were talking about your reading habits.
Yes. Oh gosh, so much to read. I'm a huge Terry Pratchett fan. I'm working my way through the Discworld series. Also, huge Agatha Christie fan. Love a crime novel. Yeah.
Oh, shout out. Will you share your reviews and your analysis on Substack? Because recently, I think it's recently or fairly recent that scholars, non-academics maybe, but I think it's mostly scholars that are shifting from Twitter to Substack to share their own research and maybe getting monetized.
Maybe. I have sort of been toying with the idea for a while. I think because I've been like wearing so many hats and doing so much different stuff. But now that I have time, I might start actually getting back to sharing the research, because it is just sitting there at the moment, and I need to start editing and get it back into shape and into a format that I want it to. So yeah, it's something I'm playing with at the moment.
How did you find it?
I haven't. It's kind of strange because a lot of my research does sort of engage with that public engagement aspect and kind of museums and things. So it's a world I'm very familiar with, but it's a bit like the TV work and the documentary. It's that balancing act of making something interesting but informative, but also not spending all your time kind of throwing facts at people.
Yeah. So maybe just something that is more informative and then can call up people to open discussions.
Exactly, yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I think, Louise, it's been a great talking about your PhD, your postdoc, your experiences in between, your baking skills, and reminiscing what we have done since we've met at the Liverpool conference and doing the TRAC. I do would like to ask you as well, then you can share with anyone who's listening to our talk, any advice that you have to those who want to do a PhD and to those who are thinking of going for a postdoc.
I think my advice might be unpopular, so I preface it with that. But I think if you're considering doing a PhD, you really need to think about why, and whether that is, do you just want a PhD for the sake of the PhD? And that is fine, as long as you have a plan. That like, don't ever, I feel like people who say you're only doing a PhD for the doctor title, it's fine to do that, as long as you know that you're going into that, doing it, and you have a plan and you have like the backing. I think, particularly when it comes to funding, I think it's great when people self-fund, but I think always have a plan to get funding first. Yeah. Particularly if you're going straight from MA to PhD, I think something I learned was it's great to take a year or two out to have a normal job and just be normal and not just stick in education the whole time, because I wish I'd have taken a bit longer to do that. But also, don't just do it because it seems like a natural progression. Something I've seen is a lot of MA programs in particular have this set way of teaching people where they expect you to go into a PhD. And I don't think anyone should ever feel like they should go blindly into it, because even though it is a natural progression for a lot of people, I think institutions in particular are rather opaque about the PhD process and also what comes after. And if you want to do a PhD, just for the sake of it, or just because you feel you have research to do, absolutely, that's great. But something I found particularly with new PhDs recently, with people who used to be my students, is there's very little information about what comes afterwards. People a lot of the time will get into a PhD thinking, oh, I can get an academic job. Going to be honest, the academic job market is shit. It's horrendous. It's so bad. And I feel like sometimes we need to shout from the rooftops how bad it is, because it's okay to want to be an academic, but you have to go into it with your eyes open, particularly when it comes to things like postdocs. And at PhD level, I think the best thing to have is stability, whether that's financial stability, emotional stability. Get a therapist, you'll need it. Like have your ducks in a row. Yeah. It's okay to not have a plan of what your PhD is going to be, but as long as you understand that you need that stability and a good environment around you, I think that's really important. And that includes supervisors. Like, talk to people who are your supervisors, current students who have been your supervisor students, because that gives you an idea of what the experience is like. And yeah, just don't assume that you're going to go into academia because that's what everyone else seems to do. Yeah. Something I was talking about with a colleague is that there's survivorship bias. The people who are currently in academia are the people who survived the chaos of the job market, but there's not many of them. Yeah. And it's okay to not go into that field. But if you do want to go into that field, resilience is key. You've got to be able to take rejection after rejection after rejection, because it's rough and it's never personal. It's never anything to do with you as a scholar or you as a researcher. It's always to do with the fact that there are not enough jobs and there are too many people. Many of the people who are applying for those jobs, tenured academics who are people who are far ahead in their career than you are. So it can be very difficult, but also if you can hack that resilience and not take it personally, I think it is possible. It's just there's a lot of patience involved. And don't put all your eggs in one basket. And definitely build those connections and build those academic networks, definitely. But have a backup plan, whether that's like for me, my backup plan is baking, museums, just education in general, not necessarily related to academia. But having that keeps me sane, knowing that if everything else goes wrong, I have something I still love to do that isn't just academia on its own. Yeah.
I think it's just in one word is just to have the mindset as well, and broaden your job prospects, and not just only to obtain the knowledge and apply it afterwards, but also apply it where appropriate. Doing side jobs just to keep you afloat, and until something happens. And understand it well. It's all about networking. It's all about whether you're likable as well. That also plays a big part, and it's just who you know. And as you said as well, it's nothing personal. I recently I've been rejected to an interview, and that's okay. So I just keep doing this as a side and see how it goes. But having the recognition to do something that you've done it's also great, and boosts your morale and can boost also your expectation, because we have the right to do that, and we expect that as well, for us to have expectations in getting something afterwards into this shitty marketplace at the moment.
I think as well, the academia is always marketed as kind of the gold standard of what comes after. But
true.
I think people forget that you've just spent 5 years or 4 years doing a project. You have managed that yourself. You've had this independence. That's a skill in itself. Yeah. People, particularly when it comes to the normal job market, it sometimes feels like, oh, I definitely felt this at the beginning. It's kind of like, oh, I have a PhD and nothing else. And it's like, no, you have a PhD, but this means more than just the piece of paper or the doctor title. You've spent several years honing skills that are useful to other people. It's just academia has taught you that it's only useful to them. So I think there's something to be said about recognizing your worth outside of academia, because certainly academia spends a lot of time telling us we're not worth much.
That is still that cognitive bias.
Yeah.
So, it's the same thing, the same advice you have also for postdocs?
Yeah, I think resilience is key. And again, the fact that it's not personal, whether it is, the big funding bodies. My God, it is the most competitive thing we go through, I feel. I know of people who are fully tenured, who are, mid to late career academics who don't get that funding. And you think, how can I get that funding if you can't? Because you're so much further ahead of your career than you. And also, I think just staying active, even if you have institutional affiliation or if you don't, being able to carve out time to go to conferences, even if they're online, to publish where you can, just keeping that door open, if that's something you want to do, is something that's really useful, because the more people you know and the more people you get chatting with, chances are they might have something coming up or they might want to collaborate. The fact that we're talking now is a collaboration that we ended up making, well over a year or 18 months ago now. So just being available and being active, I think, is really important.
Yeah. And I do think that sums up the talk. I like to know, you spoke about your previous projects, and do you have any upcoming ones as well?
So yeah, I have my upcoming antiquity article that's out. I think it's the July or the August issue. I'm not quite sure. Got the Lives and Literacy chapters that are coming out in the new year. Luxon will eventually have its publications out. We're just finalising them now, so we're hoping to submit them in the next month or two. And yeah, that's me at the moment.
Any other upcoming cakes you're also doing?
I'm actually. I am baking a birthday cake this weekend. And this will go out after his birthday, so it's fine. But it's a surprise birthday cake for a friend that I'm baking over the weekend.
Okay. Also, before we wrap up, you're looking for the World Cup.
Oh, I am, but I don't know who I'm supporting because I know I should support England,
I know
but I
you.
really want the Scots to do well.
God, because I thought now you were speaking about Egypt and so maybe you support Egypt.
Maybe I should support. Maybe. I mean, when I was in Egypt, that was the way I communicated with people because I don't speak Arabic. But as soon as someone introduced me as being from Liverpool, people were like, Mo Salah. And I was like, yes, we can speak football. And AFCON was on at the same time, the Africa Cup of Nations. So there was this. So it was great because I was able to communicate with the workers and with kind of the people I was working with simply through football. Like that was the only language we both spoke.
Wow, I definitely. But have you seen this? These things. I know I'm going to release the talk and when the World Cup has already started. But there's been like such many news about people getting banned from entering the US, and including Canada. I've seen as well. People getting having checkups.
Yeah.
You know, but obviously. There's a lot of things going on. This and so much drama.
Oh yeah. I suspect it's only going to get more dramatic.
Yes, such a thing. Well, it's the US anyway. But where can the listeners follow your work and contact you then?
So I am Egyptologist on most social media. So it's Egypto dash or underscore, depending on the social media, Lou, and then dash or underscore gist on Blue Sky, X, although I don't really use it much, a little bit. Instagram. Where else am I? I think that's most places. Yeah, so that's my little social hub, and eventually there will be some sort of blog or Substack situation coming when I get the time and attention to do so.
I think I'll make sure to put all your socials and including your bio on the show notes. And Louise, I mean, it was amazing talk, and it's great to see you again. And I mean, if you want to do another one, we can have another one. Schedule it soon, and like talking about any updates and more stuff about your PhD and your postdoc that you might have missed, and then we just didn't remember. Just maybe having another talk soon, but it would be great to have another one soon as well.
That's the frustrating thing, because so much of the Tübingen work is embargoed because it's so new. So I'm like, I can tell you about the site, but I can't tell you specifically what I'm doing because we haven't published it yet. And I'm like, it's really cool, but I can't say anything, and I can just tell you what's already available. It's like,
Oh, but we'll do another one when everything when is the embargo? When does the embargo last?
I genuinely don't know, because we've got to publish the book. So we're publishing a catalogue of all of the ostraca up to a point, because we keep finding more. And then there's going to be a book, an edited book with like interpretation of it. But I have no idea when that's going to happen as of yet. So who knows?
Oh well. But when everything gets published, then we shall do another one then.
Amazing.
All right, Louise. So thank you so much for the great talk we had, and for the students and graduates out there tuning in. Thank you all for tuning in, and it's been a pleasure.
And being like, okay, this is the animal, this is how you can interact with it, this is what happens, and try to do much of the same is take you with me. And it's all very much kind of quite casual, I guess, in the diary format. And it started actually not even as film or as videos or anything like that. It started as articles. I used to write articles for magazines.
Okay.
It started at school, actually, when I was back in Spain. Then when I moved to boarding school in England, I wrote for the school magazine.